Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm going to maybe start a little conversation that we can continue in the future about all those special tactics, strategies, and tips that we may all have when we walk into a room to collaborate for the first time or for the 100th time with a musician, collaborative partner, instrumentalist, or vocalist. And what are those specific most effective rehearsal strategies of collaboration and negotiation with our musical partners? But let me start first with a question. Who is the collaborative pianist of our day? What is the profile of the collaborative pianist? What is our skill set? The character traits, the practical and technical skills, professional expertise, our musical profile. A collaborative pianist is a pianist with a multifaceted skill set and multidisciplinary knowledge of repertoire and understanding of other instruments and voices. They possess a variety of aptitudes and expertise. A highly developed professional, usually, that possesses flexibility, adaptability, proficiency of craft, confidence, sensitivity, sensibility in relating with others, empathy and understanding, an appreciation and respect for other musicians, and a sympathetic approach to interpretation and collaboration. That, of course, is a character, skill set, and level of professionalism that the pianist should also expect or cultivate in their musical partners. The collaborative pianist by nature and trait is the ultimate negotiator. We are trained to find solutions, to match color and temperament, to negotiate artistic decisions, to support and validate our musical partners, while trying to do justice to the piece of music we are called to perform and the composer, and stay true to our own integrity and to our own artistic integrity. We always work with a variety of musical perspectives, instrumental colors, and idiosyncrasies, and a variety of artistic expressions and aesthetics, as well as different philosophical views on music and stylistic interpretations that our collaborating artists may represent. We usually act as the glue, and the promotional manager very often in ensembles, Serbian music ensembles. We're experts in conflict resolution, yes, we have to, diffusion of tension between ensemble members, and bringing different perspectives and musical approaches, culture and educational traditions to the negotiating table. So as we say at the International Keyboard Collaborative Art Society, we are kind of superheroes. Often, we are called to cast the deciding vote or merge seemingly opposite and at times very strong opinions of our musical partners with diplomacy and compassion. We are the consummate diplomats, the multiculturalists of our profession, and we thrive on a rich, complex, multidisciplinary, diverse, colorful, and dynamic work environment. The future of our profession depends on recognizing the importance and wealth of experience we can gain by embracing our musical community's multicultural heritage, and thus enrich the diversity of our skill set, create new projects and professional collaborations, and guarantee a bright future for our field and for the music profession as a whole. And now let's go to the art of collaborating, the collaboration and negotiation. Those collaborative piano skill sets and effective rehearsal strategies that help us navigate our rehearsal and help us prepare for performance with our musical partners. Let me start, I want to go a little back, and the first time to what brought me to this presentation, to prepare this presentation. The first time I presented this lecture, it was about 4 summers ago. It was in 2018 during Clarinet Essentials, a very special summer training camp for dedicated high school and early college clarinetists at UNT, the University of North Texas. I had joined a distinguished team of UNT clarinet faculty at the festival as the festival collaborative pianist there and rehearsal coach. I requested that I was given the opportunity to give this presentation and was encouraged to speak to them, to the students, about effective rehearsal strategies and a fruitful, proficient collaboration with their most important musical partner, the pianist. The idea or the goal was to give these young budding instrumental musicians some idea about the role of the pianist in the performance of their repertoire and help them develop an awareness and appreciation for the importance of the collaborator, their partner, the co-director in their musical performance and interpretation. I also thought that I would be helpful. I would be helping a little bit. I would be hopefully be able to communicate to them some useful tips and information on how to engage with their pianist in preparation of their repertoire and a performance, and to build a productive, an amicable, artistically fulfilling relationship, and maybe, if they're lucky, a long-lasting collaboration. I had worked as a solo and ensemble competition pianist in previous years in Texas, and knew firsthand that most of those very well-meaning young musicians had no concept at all of the skill and artistry it took, and no appreciation at all of the knowledge, the expertise, and the commitment and responsibility that their collaborative pianists, who every year were coming in to their schools for 2 or 3 rehearsals of 20 minutes long max, and asked to play some very serious repertoire, and they were working as those young instrumentalists, high school instrumentalists, were working for their solo and ensemble competition, competing basically for a symphonic band or orchestra chair, district-wide, regionally, statewide. It is a pretty competitive environment there, and a celebrated Texas program, rightfully so. High schoolers with some considerable technical skill at times, but very little understanding of the style and complexities and the structure of the music itself at that point in their development. Of course, there are some wonderful exceptions, but those were the exceptions. They come into the rehearsal still learning their part, usually having no idea what the piano sounds like. And more than that, more or less they believing that it's not important that they do. Of course, the way that the whole thing works at that time during the school year, with their packed schedules and the overflow of events that time of year, it doesn't look important, of course, but the repertoire that they're called to perform for those solo ensembles is difficult. It's technically challenging and vast for the pianist that is recruited to support them in that endeavor. Needless to say, it's not a job for the faint of heart or the pianist who does not yet have a considerable repertoire under their belt and the ability to sight read well and while accompanying too, or arrange and adjust on the spot. And all that while at the same time helping their young instrumentalists learn their part and relate to the composition as a whole, correct rhythms, notes, adjust tempi, and so on. I addressed this group of, if I remember correctly, about 25 or 30 young clarinetists, trying to help them develop etiquette, rapport, appreciation, and respect, and give them some tips on how to initiate that collaboration and how to develop as musicians together with and collaborate and work amicably and successfully with their pianist. But what are some of the most typical skills of the collaborative pianist? Well, we have required skills, of course. We need to know rap very well, as a recital pianist, for example, studio accompanists, a good working relationship and good people skills, understand collaborative piano repertoire, understanding all instruments and how they work, how they function. We sometimes need to play orchestra reductions, arrange orchestra reductions, play a variety of styles, um, and all that while showing a lot of respect for the applied teacher in the studio who has the first word in regards to their students. Um, so and then we're called to work on chamber music, on musicals, on art songs, opera, um, where we need to have to demonstrate some leadership in running rehearsals, choir as well, and sectionals, conducting for rehearsal purposes sometimes too. Ability to play diverse styles of music depending on the gigs that we come upon. Ability to play in band, ability to follow a conductor. We need to have strong sight reading skills. I need to be able to transpose for us singers very often. And also to write transposed instrumental parts for bands and orchestra. Um, uh, so these are some of our jobs, not all of them. As time in this time and age, our jobs become more and more complicated. We need to be pretty good at recording now too, in studio recording and layering and promoting ourselves. Working with dancers very often, or theatrical productions for those of us who love that kind of performance, and create programs for a museum, for an exhibition where a recital series accompanies, so very often in big museums, a recital series accompanies an art exhibit. We are often competition adjudicators. Um, yes, we also play solo, especially if we have church gigs. We still play solo, we can. We can very well, actually. And most of us are also private piano teachers. So, and also some of us are trying very hard to incorporate collaborative repertoire in our teaching. A lot of us, many of us, are classroom teachers as well. We engage in vocal coaching and instrumental accompanying and chamber music coaching, and we have a variety of administration skills, I think, and publicity skills, marketing skills. They're all called into, they are all necessary tools that we need to have nowadays as collaborative pianists. Whether we work for academia or freelancing or work for a different company or a non-profit organization. So, what kind of negotiations and decisions do we make in a partnership and collaboration? I often wonder about that. What does that mean to negotiate? I prologue that, I think, in that kind of wordy prologue of mine. But to be very exact with it, we are called to make musical decisions very often on the spot, and they could be a little different with the same piece, but with different partners. Decisions on temporal and agogic choices, textural hierarchy, rhythmic character and precision, tempi, expressive decisions, dynamic nuances, agogic patterns, timbral balance, mutual understanding of we need to negotiate how a piece is performed, and negotiate what we feel, how we have envisioned it, and the way that our partners have. Also, very often, voicing chords, counter melodies, counterpoint, Hauptstimme, Nebenstimme decisions can be different. And the variations on the way that we voice our chords or shape our harmonic passages depend very often on the instruments involved in the collaboration. Brahms' clarinet sonatas come to mind, and how different we are asked to play them when we play them with viola, because they sound really beautiful with viola as well. Frank violin sonata played with a cello, sometimes like a poem. So how walking into a rehearsal with a new or established musical partner, how do we approach, how we implement, how do we develop that kind of relationship and negotiation? Let me see if I can share a little bit. I have a little visual aid for this. There you go. Please let me know if you cannot see my share. So, the art of collaboration negotiation, the collaborative piano skill set, and effective rehearsal strategies. Well, meet your pianist or your musical partner, because right now I'm actually talking to the pianist and not to our musical partners. Establish an honest and respectful and open communication. Share thoughts and ideas on music in general. Discuss challenging passages of the pieces that you are called to play together. Share experiences and get to know each other a little bit. I found that very freeing, and it relaxes you. It helps you empathize with your partner and know a little more, knowing a little more about them. I feel that helps that very, very intimate and very deep collaboration in music that you are trying to achieve together. In other words, don't stay strangers. In rehearsal preparation, I've always loved the idea of having, I know we don't always have the luxury, but the idea of having the score and having analyzed the score by ourselves and together with our collaborative partners, I find that a very valuable tool. And I know that it's a luxury sometimes, that we don't always have that time or that many rehearsals together, for that matter. But whenever we can is one of the most important first steps that we can take towards understanding the piece of music we're performing the same way, and establishing that rapport, musical aesthetic rapport. Sharing thoughts and mark perceivable difficulties on your score, and spots that and some different difficult spots, or maybe interesting or intricate passages, and discuss them. Mark spots in the score that may need some extra TLC. Prioritize work for rehearsal purposes. Know what you're going to start working on first. After having analyzed the piece, you know the form of the piece, you actually know which passages are more technical, which need a little better tuning, which are unison, which are counterpoint, rhythmic characteristics that you need to learn how to do the same way. And that's why it's best to plan the rehearsal session ahead of time and manage some rehearsal time. With my trio, Triopolis, we kind of always choose what we want to rehearse and practice each time. We assign specific pieces or sections of pieces to work on any given rehearsal. We may not follow it exactly, but knowing what to focus on in our practice before our next rehearsal and having that plan to work with helps us work more efficiently, we have found. Recording rehearsals is also very important. Voice recorder, it doesn't have to be a very fancy, very high definition, high quality recording device. Your voice recorder from your cell phone will do for rehearsal recording. It's amazing what it can show you. And it can enlighten you about things that passages that frustrate you, or give you so much more information about the way that things sound. Sometimes they could be very different than what you have perceived. One example about that, which happens to me very often with my trio, is that very often they will say that, Anatolia, play a little softer. That's too big. Maybe adjust your. There's too much piano here. That's sort of a little joke too. And it has happened that that is the case, and sometimes it's not a matter of dynamic, but a matter of voicing differently, my texture differently. But most of the time it isn't. Regardless of whether I have to adjust certain things, very often, and you have to be very understanding with that, our partners receive a massive sound from behind them, really, on stage. And it's very difficult to know that this is not what comes down to the recital hall. It can be overwhelming. So we have to approach this with a lot of understanding, and by recording things, we make it clear what needs to be done. And you don't want them, your musical partners, to feel this way, because then they overplay or they change the sound. There's kind of, and then it creates a lot of tension when one has, for example, a melodic line to bring out, and they think that that is drowned by the piano. We learn with time to understand when we are too much, or when we need to voice something differently, even on the spot. But having those recording sessions, first of all, as they say, record everything, right? So it gives us leverage and the proof of things and how they actually sound, or more or less. Listening to the recorded sections attentively and together, if possible, is wonderful. I have to admit, we don't always have time for that, so we will very often listen at them at home, and then email, text each other, and get back to it the next rehearsal. Once you feel ready, again, recording complete takes. It's a wonderful thing. Making notes about elements in your performance that you believe could still improve, or others you would like to change. Listening to the complete performance of yourself playing is sometimes torturous, I have to admit. It's not something we always embrace, because it always makes me cringe, right? I have to say. But it's also, by the way, all jokes aside, it's very necessary. So we have to go through that pain of coming to terms with how we actually sound. This way, I think also it's easier to discuss and resolve interpretative differences of opinion in rehearsal. Also, trying different things out with each other, different ways of playing, and this way kind of validating each other's view on aesthetic or musical view on certain things is also very helpful. I always say that in rehearsal, be ready to adjust to somebody else's interpretation and artistic will, or convince them otherwise. But you have to be ready for that. So you have to have the knowledge of the piece and the conviction of your opinion, and the confidence to present it. It may work, it may not. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What matters is that all three of you, or four of you, two of you, three of you, four of you, however big the ensemble may be, work, play, and breathe together as one organism, or as close to one organism as possible. Listening carefully and respecting each other's opinions, taking them seriously, is extremely important. I know I keep saying that, but I find to be in rehearsal one of the most important elements of a successful collaboration. And that goes for those young instrumentalists that may come in our studio that have never worked with a pianist before. Communicating to them that their word, that their opinion matters. Whether they are aware of the style or not, or whether they are right or not about it, or whether we have arguments for a different approach, validating how they think frees them. I feel that it helps them develop easier and faster as musicians because they don't feel intimidated. They don't feel that no matter what they say, it's not good because that shuts them down. And after all, what you're trying to do is to bring out the musician in them and their own voice that then will come together with yours, and together you'll create something wonderful. Um, we have to recognize the differences and the special characteristics between soloistic and accompanimental pieces, or sections, because in one piece there is everything, and equal partnership pieces, chamber music pieces. By analyzing and distinguishing between featuring lines, between thematic, structural, textural material, we can achieve that much easier without too much friction, hopefully. Um, Also, we need to know that very often something that is very difficult, a very difficult passage on our part, that takes most of our practice time to learn and perform, does not make it automatically the most important voice of the composition. That goes for our instrumental partners as well, by the way. Um, Treat the piece you're performing as a complete, a coherent work of art, not your part and their part. That applies more to our instrumentalists and not to us as pianists, because we are empathetic and sympathetic, and we embrace, we support and embrace. Uh, but they are not separate. The parts are not separate. It's not you and me, it's us. Again, this is something that mostly other instrumentalists and vocalists very often struggle with, not pianists so much, but at the end of the day, a good musician is a good musician, and all good musicians care about rendering the best possible performance of the specific piece, doing justice to the composer and the style of composition they're presenting. I'll come to that in a minute. Yes. Uh, in rehearsal, try to work on specifics. For example, in the beginning, when we first learn to collaborate with other people, I see that with my little ones too, the pre-collegiate groups that I have, we have to practice cues. Beginning, ending, in between, changing sections. How much time do they wait on a fermata? How do we come in together? We need to practice those things. We don't think about them and they are there automatically. Also, finding ways to cue each other is very important. Different people understand cues in a different way, and depending on where they come from, what's the background, and what kinds of collaborations they've had, and their own personal tastes. So we need to come in agreement on how to cue what. Balancing of the voices and between parts, between instruments, and the voices. Oh, since the piano is the polyphonic instrument, between the voices of the piano part is extremely important. And as I said in the beginning, deciding what is Hauptstimme, what's the featuring, what is the support, and the Nebenstimme, the supported line. The thematic changes, the dialogues between the instruments, register issues, dynamics, expression and phrasing, the direction of the line, small gestures versus long gestures, changes in the mood and the character and the articulation of the piece, technically challenging passages, all those elements, they're very specific and we need to address them. In every piece they're different, but they're very specific also for each piece, so we need to address them early on, before certain habits develop in the way that we play something. After all, only the first time we play through something as a reading run through, let's say, it's a side reading experience. It could be a side reading experience. The rest is a deep study of the work. Now, at this time, I would like, if possible, to address some of those situations, like the rhythmically intricate passages, those kinds of elements, or texturally complicated passages, issues of balance and timbre, matching and blending, contrasting, by using a specific example that I have here. So I'm going to stop share this screen.
Hey, I'm just gonna pipe in for 1 second. Sorry to bother you. When you share, will you share full screen? And when you come back to that, because it's really
Yes,
blurry.
yes,
Thank you so much.
absolutely, yes.
Get it.
My next screen comes from our, where is it? Okay. I'm going to use a very, very traditional, a very established piece in our canon uh, for flute and piano, Trockenblumen by Schubert. The reason I chose that piece is because almost everybody knows it and most people have played it. It's gorgeous, we know. It may not represent our Latinx and Black composers repertoire that we are trying to promote, but it's a wonderful example of a piece loaded with kinds of challenges. Afterwards, I will refer to some more modern repertoire through little video clips. And the challenges that they may have, uh, um, you know, in performance. So let's see. There it is. Yep. And there. And then just letting it play for a minute, and then I will go to some. Did you see it?
Yes.
That's the opening, and I'm going to take you to the theme. 233. I like that it has, thankfully, the um, score as well. Um, In the theme, the exchange of melodic material and the attention to matching articulation is one of the collaborative elements we need to pay attention to. So, for example, here we have a very typical example of a collaborative element that speaks to how the two musicians understand the articulation, the length of the staccato notes versus the slurred notes, the dotted rhythm, and also the phrasing, the form of the phrase in four measures long, and then eight measures uh, for a climax. And these two young musicians, I think I'm doing a very good job with that. Uh, and that is one of the elements that needs to be rehearsed in the beginning of the performance. I'm sure, especially as pianists, we we don't have an understanding of how the flute is going to treat that the staccato note, right? Right by playing it on ourselves, we can play it in 10 different ways. But deciding how to do it, and although we come in first, we need to come in first with an understanding of the idiosyncrasy of the flute and the way that it's possible for a flutist to articulate. Also, that goes as well about that is also true about dynamics, of course. We can have different kinds of pianissimos every time. Everything is relative, but a pianissimo that matches the specific color is extremely important. If we don't practice that, then it's almost like we're side reading every time we play. Then another element is where is variation number? In variation number 1, there is a lot of breathing difficulties, challenges for the flutist. It's a very flowing passage, hundreds of notes, and there's barely any place for the flutist to breathe. So discussing where those little spots will happen and making them expressive instead of gaps guarantees that the music still flows naturally and without and you making that breath an organic part of the variation and not something that you have to put there because you just have to breathe. But the pianist needs to know that and needs to accommodate that. Let's listen a little bit. There's another. Yeah, it's a pretty challenging variations, I have to say, especially for younger flutists. And it's not easy for the piano at all. It has those like little intricate flowing passages as well in imitation of the flute, and it needs to sound like that. Very light and very crisp and very clear, and it's actually a very challenging thing. And that brings me to the next variation. Variation number 2, which is extremely difficult. I'm not going to play it, but as you can see, it's full of octaves in the piano part and forte, but a forte that needs to accommodate what Schubert wants, like a graceful character. A light, a sort of a vibrant but still kind of crisp and light and airy quality of sound, which is very difficult when you have octaves in the bass jumping around all the time in a very fast tempo. And this is what I mean by very fast tempo. And also notice how the pianist, when they play on their own, introducing the line and introducing the melodic material, they come with a specific dynamic forte that will match the flute when it comes in, the dynamic level that the flute can produce. And then when the flute comments and completes that little phrase, right? They accommodate by voicing a little differently and becoming just a hair softer without losing intensity. Here in this variation, we have tuning challenges, I think, especially in the second half of the variation. And the challenge is also matching character and the shape of the line, and bringing out the lyricism of the piece with a very kind of busy part. There's a lot of there's a duet, a lot of comment and response, and that makes it very beautiful and like a lace. Like one instrument comes in and out of the other, and that's one of the most beautiful, actually, variations in that piece. We'll play a little bit from it. Here, where they play in parallel, intonation becomes an issue very often. And although the pianist cannot do nothing about intonation, we can help our flutists find that fine tuning, work with them, and kind of not discuss it, but play it, rehearse it a lot until they find the right tuning for that specific passage. Another issue with this piece, in many of the variations, like the previous one, like number 2, but also number 5, is that we have a theme under a very virtuosic, a theme on the piano, under a very virtuosic fioritura, sort of like a coloratura passage of the flute that is kind of, no, not kind, it's very difficult to play and to play well. And um, that variation, yeah. Here we go. This is exactly and another one of those variations that when I am called to work with it with students, undergrads especially, that they get that piece for the first time. The technical There's a lot of technical challenges, especially in the breathing, and finding and accommodating the right tempo for them is extremely important. Otherwise, they can't make it through. Also, it's a flourishing sort of lace that they're playing there above the theme of the variation, and you need to bring that out, but without overwhelming the capabilities and the possibilities of the flute sound. Um, in general, this is a very good piece to use in teaching collaboration between two young musicians, and it's a remarkably beautiful piece. Now, uh, uh, before I close this little presentation, I would like to take a little bit, like a few minutes, to play um, some snippets of recitals with my ensembles, with my trios, with people that I've worked with, and I still am. Why am I doing that? I just want to demonstrate a little bit what happens when one more musicians or more comes into the mix, and also what is different when a pianist plays. I could not find my recording with a piano trio, with strings only, but I have plenty of mixed ensembles, and how different it is when the pianist is called to play in a trio with an oboe and cello, for example, or with violin and clarinet, two high register instruments. So they're missing the cello, they're missing even viola, right? And the dynamic is very different there. And it's more difficult to compose, from what I hear from composers, for that kind of medium. And I would like to play a few of those and then open a little conversation to discuss your experiences, maybe, with collaboration, with different kinds of examples, with different configurations. And if time allows, I would like to also my fellow committee members who have given us some really wonderful performances this week, to discuss anything about their collaboration, the preparation for that performance with their also professional musicians, and how that rehearsal looked like as they were preparing these pieces, especially in this year of the pandemic. Okay, let me go. My first example will be with my. I'm sorry. Yeah, it will be with my trio.
Want to build an
Oops.
online course without all the complicated tech? Then you need Kajabi, the powerful all-in-one platform built for
Okay. All right. So this is a recital with my trio Triopolis, and we are, as you can see, hopefully, can you see? Yeah? Violin, clarinet, and piano. And this was one of our recitals during the pandemic, the one and only that we had. It was a recorded fundraiser for Chamber Music International, I should mention them. And we played a variety of music, contemporary composers, 20th century composers, all of them, but a little more traditional for chorists. They're more modernist. And I want to juxtapose a couple of different pieces. One is where is it? One is Hoiby, I think, the first one that I want, right? Yeah. The first one is Hoiby, and it's a very graceful and responsorial, elegant piece of. Kimberly, my clarinetist Kimberly Collboration says it's like Disney movie music. It's very, very entertaining. I really like that piece. But let me see. 325. So just why did I choose this one for this? As far as I can remember from rehearsals, passing on the melody with no with seamlessly from my part, the piano part, which represents kind of an extra trio there, the piano, and to their little duets, because very often in that specific medium, in that specific instrumentation, the violin and the clarinet playing a lot of duet work. And I'm commenting and taking over and passing it on to them, especially in a piece like that. And that trying to do this flawlessly has been a challenge for me. And also adjusting from a part where I have to come out and show, my colors, and then kind of drop and accommodate their own their own material. And then, of course, we went to something completely different. And which brought a lot of pain for me, because I had a very frenetic, difficult, raucous part to play, but at the same time, I had to try not to cover them at any point. And William Bolcom is an amazing composer, knows exactly how to score for every instrument. However, the violin always gets covered, especially when there's a piano and a clarinet. So there was a lot of negotiation with this piece. And I'm just going to play the beginning, nothing else. I'm going to move on. Oh. and so on and so forth. I have to say that if I ask my musical partners to this day, they will say that I have to play softer. But I have fortissimos and accents and big leaps. And then we asked Malcolm, and he said, no, the piano has to be dominating there. Not always, but you can hear that even, and we worked very hard on it, but, and Felix is a very strong violinist, but in that collaboration with the clarinet and the piano, it's a very big challenge. And how do I negotiate that as a pianist? Is there something I can do to help that out? Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. I'm caught in the moment of, playing as well. But those are very important and actually very juicy and very wonderful things to work on with your partners and find that common voice. I'm gonna stop this little demonstration with a Brazilian composer, just to get to the aura, so the mood of our institute, of our festival, and that is how you Guillaume Rieper, and I have two examples, but I think I will play something that is mixed instrumental and vocal, and that is the Celia for soprano, cello, and piano, just a little bit. Because there, I had the challenge of playing with an extremely soulful and beautiful cellist, but playing in the lower register very often. We had a lot of dialogue with each other, and that it wasn't primary, secondary. It was almost like two singers singing a duet. And then, of course, bringing it in for our beautiful soprano, Carol Wilson, and again, making that flawless, making relevant to what she was singing is one of the big challenges, especially in a situation like we had with that Festival Brasileiro some years ago at UNT, where we didn't have that much time to prepare together. We had to have it ready, and we had 3 rehearsals, and we had to go on stage and play. So efficiency in rehearsal was of paramount importance. And let me go and see, and there it is, and then Cecilia 426. Listen to the beautiful duet between the soprano, cello, and also. And so on and so forth. I'm going to stop sharing. This was a very happy collaboration, obviously, because these are amazing musicians. Carol is very meticulous, and their little duets with Nikola Rujevic, our cello professor at the University of North Texas, were rehearsed quite a bit in that 1 week. Also, she had to deal with singing for the first time in her life in Portuguese. So Thankfully, the composer was there, which is another element, right? If you have that luxury of having a wonderful composer coming to your rehearsals and listen to their music, especially if it's a composer, we have commissioned a few that just compose this piece for you or your ensemble, or is somebody you know that has composed it recently and they can come into your rehearsal. That adds another element of collaboration, another element of trying to figure out how to make the composer happy, but also communicate very often if certain things are really not possible. And there are some things that composers do that are not playable, and they're beautiful in their heads. But yeah, with that little excerpt, I would like to open the floor, right, Stacy? And with questions and comments and your experiences, please.
You have a couple questions here. One was it's related to the performance rehearsal strategies when you know that someone is rhythm might not be exactly right, but they potentially don't realize that. What are some strategies to try to have a conversation about that?
Um, Again, for me, I have to be honest, it makes it more difficult if that somebody is a fellow professional musician and not a student. Because there we have all developed, a respect for what we have already accomplished. And it has happened to me many times that I have misread a rhythm. And one of my colleagues will tell me, hey, are you sure about this? Can we do it again together? There are beautiful ways of saying something, communicating something without making it feel like they are, oh my gosh, to blame. That their whole existence depends in that mistake that they made there, or we made. That goes for the pianist as well, because we are blamed also very often about things that are not ours, but in their frustration, sometimes our collaborative partners trying to figure out how to do things, they may say, oh, but you didn't come in, it wasn't the right tempo. We can get upset, but we can also just say, oh, wait a minute, let's back up a little bit. Can we do it one more time? If it's something rhythmical, can we use metronome, please? I'm very much for metronome. I wasn't as much as I am now, but thanks to my colleague, to Kimberly Collboration, who swears that she wants metronome in every rehearsal in the beginning when we're preparing a piece. And I think clarinetists in general, woodwinds in general, use metronome more than string players, for example. They want to be very exact because it's a fingering issue and a timing issue, and how they distribute their breath. And what tempo works for that, for each passage. So they learn very early to be very musical but metronomical. And I've used that. I don't know if that answers the question, but bottom line, there are ways of doing things and ways of saying things that will not put pressure or will not make somebody feel offended. And no one wants that. We know, we have gone through it as collaborative pianists. You don't want to be put on the spot or make feel that you are to blame for something that didn't go well, when in fact this is a collaboration, and whatever happens, no matter whose fault it is at the moment, it goes to both or all of them, all the members of the ensemble.
There's another great question. What do you do when you're the pianist and your soloist or someone in an ensemble keeps telling you to be quiet, even if you might have the melody and to be softer and softer? What do you do with that?
Okay. So I had to do that with a couple of students this year. With Brahms, actually. That was a comment. Who made that comment about Brahms? Because it was clarinet sonatas, and they walk into the room saying, but it's my solo. And I'm like, no, it's not your solo. It's a chamber music duo sonata. Solo, it's Weber not the Sinfonia Concertante, but a Weber piece, let's say, right? There are a lot of virtuosic pieces for clarinet where truly the piano is very accompanimental, very difficult. You need to be able to catch everything, and the flexibility of tempi and rhythms that they use when they play virtuosically. But you are a supporting role. In Brahms, not so much. If anything, I was like, you're just playing this beautiful little thing, which is a comment of what I just played. You're finishing a melody. So that's how I approached it. I decided to go, okay, let's go back and see where does the melody start? Who starts it and who takes it after that? Are you commenting here? Is it a little gesture that you're making, or do you really have a complete melody? I think very often they don't know how to express themselves. What they may want to say is that the way that, because it's a thick texture on the Brahms sonatas, for example, that's just an example. Frank is another example, and so many others. Hinastera, since we were talking about it, my goodness. So it sometimes they want to say that they hear a lot, and it's a big sound that comes to their ear. It makes them push, and what we can do there is like stop and think about it a little bit. How can we negotiate that, and how can we accommodate? Because there is a truth in it sometimes. Not that we need to be softer, but we need maybe to start voicing differently, bring out another voice than the one that we chose to bring, depending on, like with Frank, when I play Frank Sonata with violin, I bring out a completely different voice in the texture than I do with cello. With cello, I kind of favor more the right hand and the high, because I will cover them completely if I kind of, while the violin needs more support underneath. And then I come, and so things like that. Again, some will be just who they are. If they want to go that way, there's nothing you can do. I usually, stand my ground, quite honestly. Very often, the other thing, I don't know if that's a question too. Could you please play with a short stick? I was like, no, I can actually adjust myself. I can play well. I can do it. And why do I like with singers? I do it, but it's a different situation there. Also, developing voice doesn't have the same kind of strength and volume and support. But the stick for the pianist muffles the sound and the texture of what we play very often in pieces like that. In a sonata by Brahms, in a Frank sonata, and in a Stereo sonata, in a what was it that I was playing? What is it? Francais for clarinet and piano. And there is so much there. Lately, I played a very, very demanding piece for alto, again, Francais, for alto saxophone and piano, and it was all Latin rhythms and Brazilian and merengue and all kinds, and it's beautiful. And I have so much in the texture, and so much the mood of the piece depends on the pianist. The harmonic progressions, the tensions, it's all on the piano. And Francais uses the skeleton of the harmonic progression, but he's very polytonal. They're like pantonal in his approach, right? So, and it was so difficult, and so difficult to stay under. Thankfully, it was alto sax that has a lot of sound, but still, we had to negotiate that too.
I think that's great. You hit on some really good points. And one that struck me that you said was the conversation, to have the tools and the vocabulary to actually have conversations when things are, I think that's something we all learn. I don't think it comes naturally in the very beginning. And then there's another question too, which is really great. What is the expectation for the first rehearsal? Is it different with professionals than it is with students? And how do you feel about that particular, induction into the first rehearsal and then going from there?
For this one, I think we all share the same experiences. There are students and there are students, right? I mean, I've played with students that are much better than many professionals that I've played with already. And then there are the students that are beginning and at the regional university, as I'm right now, which builds foundation for them and starts to develop their talent. So I can't approach the rehearsal the same way in these two situations of students. Usually, when I have to deal with a kind of a less developed or less experienced young musician, I will contact them beforehand. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Sending them some nice examples of recordings of pieces. They do the same sometimes. Like I'm the first person when they bring me music. We discuss, oh, who have you heard playing it? And there are a lot of songs also that I accompany. A lot of them I know, some I don't. So I have to also go in and I was like, oh, okay, can you send me some of the stuff that you're listening to so that I know who is your role model at this point, and beginning rehearsals with our early college students are a learning experience. They're learning the piece with you, while a graduate student at USC, for example, would cut your throat if you would come into the rehearsal and you didn't know your part as well, as well as they did. It's a different mentality there. Not that they don't have a lot to learn, but of course we both do. Then I treat it as, okay, this is my partner, and they share their ideas with me, and I will share mine. I have to have it very well studied. I have to know that piece very well, so that I can actually exchange ideas. That's the first rehearsal and play through. Usually with professionals and advanced students, we just play through once. Whatever happens, just try to play through, and then we stop and we start organizing the rehearsal. And what went wrong and why, or tempo. I don't like this there. I like a different tempo. Very often they come very prepared to tell you, I'd like to start rehearsals with this section because it's challenging. What do you have there? Could we play this slowly? Slow practice also in rehearsal is just the medicine. Especially if you're trying to play something fast. You have to play very slow. There is no other way to understand texture. It's different to see it on the score and different to hear it. So I know how it sounds, but do I? Until I hear it played. Yeah.
I love the idea, especially how you've approached the subject, and you're very clear and very straightforward about how it has worked, and some really good ideas throughout this process. I really like it because I think women can be very strong, and we can adjust, which is what we all do. Obviously, you've talked about that, and be flexible. But I think continuing to pass that along to those who might not have had as much experience, or maybe they had a bad experience with somebody,
Yeah.
and then you're hesitant because it's a job. But I think that strength comes in different forms, and I love how you have approached that today, just because that's who you are. But I think you're giving a lot of really very strong examples of how to go forward, and we probably need to talk about that more.
Oh, of course, yeah. This is like just the beginning of kind of our not just brainstorming, but sharing experiences. We heard from Dr. Hill as well yesterday, very, very enlightening conversation. Helen Summers with Velasquez, these are collaborations and professionals that their rehearsal strategy and the rehearsal process, it's probably a workshop by itself. So, and we are different people. Every musician is different, and matching is very important too. Sometimes we are not lucky. We are not matched well. It happens. You still have to do your work and finish your project, and you do the best that you can. You can compromise, and don't take me wrong, and be scolded, especially by applied professors, that, oh, don't tell them what to do, and you're not supposed to coach, or stuff like that. I was like, like what? I understand their frustration there too. Especially when it's a developing singer, let's say, or no, clarinetist. They need to, they won't play the piece the way that they would play it maybe in 4 years and 5 years, and they know their technical difficulties and what they need to deal with. So they have a specific way of instruction and giving them certain musical advice. But I think that the interpretation itself, once they've gotten that instruction from the applied professor, lies with a collaborative pianist. And if I don't share this with them, then I'm doing them a disservice, because they are not developing as musicians. They're just chewing the food that it was given to them. I do understand the applied professor, and that's why my approach to that is, okay, we need a better communication, the two of us. I need to be your collaborator. And if that specific student needs that and that and that, and I need to play, I shouldn't do that ritardanto there, or he needs a different, or she needs a different tempo, and for me to maybe even kind of punctuate a different pulse, right? Then I would know it, that I would do it with in another collaboration, or that my own personal aesthetic and the decision would be, I'm fine with that, but I need to know it beforehand.
I also think that
Okay.
that students can be intimidated, especially in the very beginning of a
Yeah.
process, and that can last for years. I always feel that I want to create equality with students. I want to voice that to them. This is not me telling you because I
Yeah.
may
Yeah.
have done this for a long time, but that shared equality is just so inherently important. Or there's always going to be some type of you just can't make decisions because
Yeah.
it has to be formed with equality. So I love that point. I think that's really important.
Well, and also the students, no matter how young they are and how inexperienced they are, they need to or immediately know that they are valid. Their opinion, even if it's wrong, it doesn't matter. We all have wrong. They make wrong decisions musically or otherwise. So, but they have the right to say it and to try it. And no, I'm obliged. I am there to do it. Yes, I'll try it, and let's see, does it work? You know, but what my struggle is that they are very intimidated, as you said, and they don't share that. Sometimes they don't share what they did with their applied professor too, so I have to like guess from what they would how they would like to approach a song, or what tempo actually do they have, and when does it change in the middle of the piece, and why, so these kinds of things. And the more you know about their own struggle with their in their development, the better you can accommodate them without compromising the artistic quality of the piece. There are a lot of ways to play a piece. We don't have to play the Frank violin sonata. Definitely not like high fetch. so, so, and still you can make such a wonderful interpretation that also has something fresh. And with younger musicians, especially if we want them to stay on it and insist and persist and develop, we can just slap them down like, oh, you're not good yet, so you don't matter. Do what I say. Oh,
I think that's wrapping up with all the questions. And I know I want to give you the last word. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time. And I know I can so much compassion for what you do and reaching so many people. And that's a huge benefit for the Puerto Rico Collaborative Institute. And I know that we all look forward to next year and being in person and being able to have more of these conversations. But I want to make sure I give you the last word.
I just want to say it's been a pleasure. This has been a wonderful week. We still have one day, of course, a very important day, but and a wonderful recital tonight. The bolero art song that relates to Puerto Rico, speaks to the heart and soul of Puerto Rico. So I would like to invite everybody to stay tuned and watch that with Maestro Luis Marin and mezzo soprano Fabiana Gonzalez. And I would just say that our works, this kind of presentations and talks, they can develop into some beautiful workshops, and we can allow our students to create something as well by themselves. And so I'm looking forward to next year when we can all share more and be there for each other, not through only through Zoom, as wonderful as it is. Chamber music and collaborative work is an intimate work, and it's a face-to-face work. It's a work that's done best when we are in the same room playing music together. Thank you.
I'm so looking forward. Thank you. And thank you for the team that makes this happen this whole week. Looking forward to tonight's performance. It's going to be an incredible performance. So join us on Facebook Live, and we have more tomorrow. You can follow us again on Facebook. And if you have any questions, make sure you send them. I'm sure Dr. Ioannides would be happy to have more communication after this. Thank you so much.
Bye.